Hi,
How are you?
I'm good, and you?
I'm fabulous.
Oh, thank you so much for being here with me. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Yes, I'm
And
excited too. It feels like I know we had to reschedule this I had to reschedule a couple times, so it feels like today's just like the day it's meant to be.
yes, and you know what? I have a story for like around that.
Amazing. Amazing.
And I know like storytelling is such a powerful like tool that us humans have been carrying for so long. And I know that storytelling is such a powerful thing for you in your life, in your brand, like as a line six. And so, and this story is about the power pivot and timing versus time, which is amazing. So
Perfect.
if we would have been recording the first time, it would not have been on in the right podcast.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. I've had this happen many of times.
And the reason why I'm saying this is because I invited you to a podcast and now you are in another podcast, which is so cool. And I
Oh,
know that and I know that you have like had like different seasons of your podcast. And so the first podcast that I launched, I actually started to work around this time of year last year. And I launched a podcast in the fall around where like the time where we started to work together in different containers.
yep,
And I've brought the podcast forward for like 9 months, knowing that it was a stepping stone to something else. Like I wanted to do a podcast for so long, but like I was like, okay, I'll just start and then I'll just
yeah,
see where that lands.
yeah,
And I recorded the last episode of season three, like beginning of June to be
yep.
aired like 2, 3 weeks after. And while I was recording, I was like, this is the end. Like I could feel that was the end. That was like the end of this, like the podcast, and something else was coming up. So I was like, okay, like this is the end of it. And so in the like all of that, it was rescheduled for like the next one. And I was like, you know what? I feel like the podcast episode with Jack belongs to the new one. I just don't know what the new one is gonna be like. And 2 days before last week when we had the schedule, it just dawned on me. And I just feel like podcasting is such a way to bring people in our energy. And I was still in the other podcasts in my head a lot instead of being in my energy.
Yeah.
And I decided to switch it. And I decided to really bring people in what it is to be with me, what it is to walk with me. So the podcast is called Walk with Me.
Oh, I
So
love that.
welcome to
I
Walk
love
with Me.
that. I love this. And I love this story and hearing this because, I mean, there's been so many power pivots in my journey as an entrepreneur in my business. And like, there's times where things just feel complete and it doesn't really make sense to me often, even at the time. It definitely doesn't make sense to other people, but oftentimes it like doesn't even make sense to me. And it's just in that like trust and that choosing. So even, this example of like this feeling like we're meant to record now because there's a different energy, there's a different frequency here. And this is where I always like just have to trust in what's going on. So like back, and it's interesting the timing that you say, right? It's like the beginning of June. Well, we were first set to record this podcast, I think literally like June 5th, like that first week of June when you started to feel this. And at the time for me, I was transitioning from living in Costa Rica back to Canada for the summer. And it just felt like my schedule wants to be like clear and wants to be free. And even within my own podcast, it's kind of interesting this timing as well. I had two women that I was supposed to be recording with at the time. And so then it was like, okay, my guest, because oftentimes when I am in that transition and traveling, I don't like to be doing extra recording. So it's like, okay, well, I have two guest episodes. They'll go out for the end of June, and I do my podcast in seasons. But it was like the season doesn't feel complete yet. So then it'll, continue to go through June. I'll start recording when I'm back in Canada the end of June. Well, these two women who are both friends of mine and live in Costa Rica. I've tried to record with each of them 4 times. And there's always like some weird happening that happens. Like the first time, the one woman, she like, we literally saw each other in the morning, dropped our kids off together. And then when she got home, she's like, there is this construction crew at my house, like doing something with the pool that I didn't know. And I was like, okay, we'll re-record. And then, so there's all these happenings. And then the one woman, this is even more wild because her and I were set to record a podcast episode for her podcast and then a podcast for my podcast. We recorded for her podcast for an hour and 15 minutes, no issue. And then we're like, let's take 5 minutes, like grab some water, record for my podcast. Like her internet just stopped. Like it's like, nope, like not happening. Last week when you and I went to record, we're building a basketball court for my son, and the people coming to build it showed up on the day that they weren't supposed to show up on. And it's like, and the reason why I want to share all these examples, it's like I know that there's different conversations. I recorded with that one woman now for my podcast, and it was a different conversation than we would have had a month prior. Like this conversation is a different conversation than we would have had a month prior. I'm currently writing a book right now that I had, like, I wanted to start, not I wanted to, I did start writing 7 years ago. And then there's been moments where I'm like, I should write that book like 3 years ago, 2 years ago. It's like, okay, I should write that book. I should get in this energy. But it felt forced. And I was like, I'm not willing to force it. And right now I'm writing, and I'm writing every day. And it is a completely different book than the book I started writing 7 years ago. Although what I wrote 7 years ago is supporting this book. It's like part one of a 3-part book. If I would have wrote because I felt like I needed to get the story out 3 years ago, like it would have been completely different. It would have been laced with different energy, different codes. And so this is, I often say that, can I trust in timing more than time itself? Can I not put this pressure on things to happen in this human timeline? Can I trust in the things that are happening around me? And not even because it's like our soul knows. And so I wanted to say this. It's not because like, ooh, there's this like divine time, like, and this is like, I think a interesting conversation for people. It's not because there's this like timeline that things are supposed to happen on. Like, I don't also feel that in the sense like it's already predetermined anyways. And so we should just like, not step forth. But it's knowing that there's like things that are in service of your soul's agenda that you can feel energetically that you have no idea about, like up here yet, up in our mind yet. And so this to me is where that surrender is like, instead of being like, frustrated or feeling bad or feeling guilty about the fact that I asked you to reschedule this twice, it's like, hey, I know when we do record, there's going to be something here for you, for me, for the listeners. And so there's like that trust in that timing is what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. I so agree with that. And it's such like it has been my experience, and it has been my experience for a long time. But up until I got into your world, it did not make sense in the way that not making sense made sense. And and the
Love that. It
reason
didn't make sense in the way that not making sense now makes sense.
exactly, exactly. And and the interesting thing is I made a very big pivot in my life almost 3 years ago. And like, this is the type of pivot that is like unfathomable for most people, in the sense that like it is huge, and like selling everything and moving to another country where you're still learning the language, where you still learning the culture, and trying to build a business that like was not brick and mortar, but like it was like with people physical, to an online business. Like it was a big move. And I, like 2 years ago around this time, I told my husband, I said, I feel like there's something like, I had a vision. We moved here. I feel that there's a next step. But right now, I am so scared because I don't know if there's going to be somebody else on the other side to calibrate, to hold space for these crazy ideas that I have. for the majority of people that don't make sense. And I don't want to explain anything because I just want to move in a direction. And I said to my husband, I said, I'm at this point now where I know this is where I'm going. I just don't know where it's going. And I'm just gonna sit with it and trust my intuition and trust my soul that I'm gonna be at the right place at the right time.
So this, like what I feel, and how I've often described myself, like I'm a visionary without a vision. And what I mean and by this is like there isn't that concrete, like this is where I'm going, this is where it's headed, because I'm so willing to move in alignment with my soul. And I bring in human design quite a bit into my mentorship, and whether it's human design or not, but like how we're designed to make decisions. Like if you have sacral energy in your human design, you're a Manny generator, like you're supposed to follow those yeses and nos in the moment, in the now. And so, how can you decide and choose for what comes a year from now, 5 years from now? And for me, it's like when we can allow ourselves to be in the presence of now, it's so powerful. So that means not bringing in that past evidence we've collected that allows that fear to come in, that makes us hold back, that makes us play not to lose. That means not stepping so far into the future that almost can like limit us in a way. And I know that people have such varying different experiences with this, and each of us is unique in this, in terms of like setting goals and numbers to hit. And my invitation is always like, you get to do what feels aligned and what works for you. But I also work with a lot of people who have such a strong vision and they have these goals, and then they get there and they're like, wait, like, now what? Like, is this it? Like, there's still a feeling there that there's like more for me to access, that I'm not fully fulfilled here. And so I believe for many of us, there's a point in our journey where it's like, okay, if I want to be available for more and available for what I can't figure out from like the human lens, well, I've got to be willing to lead in that which I can't yet like see, what I can't like, it's not tangible. I can't quite grasp it. I can't even sometimes like quite explain it because we don't have the words for it yet. And while I believe that this for me is that energy of a visionary without a vision, I also find in hindsight, there tends to be these moments where it's like, I had no idea of that, but it was like, oh, but I said this thing. So my soul actually did have an idea. An example I can give you of this is that I was in a business partnership for, oh my gosh, I want to say like 8 years, but I don't even know fully accurately if that's true. We had been in a business partnership before we fully stepped into the coaching industry, and we stepped into the coaching industry in 2018. And by the end of 2020, I was like very clear that I felt complete in that business. And again, this was like one of those make no sense moves and feelings, because it was a very successful business. It was a 7-figure business. It's with my best friend. Like we loved creating together. We are still friends to this day. Like there was no like weird thing, friendship energy that made the business dissolve. It just was like, this feels complete. And I remember saying like, and honestly, that feeling did come out of nowhere for me, is what it felt like. Like her and I ran which now is our last retreat together. And when she was driving away from it, I just had this feeling come over me like, that's it. And when I shared that with her, like she felt it as well. And that was, complete. So this was in December of 2020. Now in August of 2021, so a year and a half before, we were invited to film this documentary. And it was such an incredible day and an experience filming this documentary. The crew that came out to my house and the executive producer and the director, they're like, okay, this is season 1. It was featuring 18 different coaches. And they're like, if we do a season 2, like it could literally just be you guys. Like they're like, this is awesome. Like and it was an incredible experience for her, for the crew, like everyone. And from there, I honestly felt like this is good. Like, and I think I talked about this. I was like, I think we're gonna have our own like full show. And also, we recorded all day. We wrapped recording. We had our team out here and their family and my business partner's family, and we invited the crew to stay. And I had this beautiful property in BC, and we were outside and we made this big, beautiful garden party, and we had food delivered, and we were having champagne and we were celebrating. And the executive producer was like, can we like just film for like 2 more minutes? And like filming was done. Like my kids were all like, we were like in like celebration mode. And she's like, can we film for 2 more minutes? Like I just have another question for you. And I was like, yeah, sure. And she asked each of us, like, where do we see our business was called Fem? Like, where do we see ourselves? Where do we see Fem in 5 years? And my response was, who even knows if Fem is going to exist when this documentary airs? Like, but it felt like, you know what I mean? Like, it felt like, well, of course it's going to exist. Like, we're just beginning here. We're just getting started. Like, that was our, the year before was our first $1 million year in our business. It's like, well, of course it's going to exist, is what my mind said. But those words came out of me. And it's fascinating now that the documentary still hasn't aired, but now they have that literally on video. That's like, that's such a, tap into the unknown. Like, my soul knew something that my human hadn't quite figured out yet.
That's pretty awesome. That's
Yeah.
it's interesting because the mind can make so much control of everything and certainties out of like thin air. And when we're tapping into the soul that knows like so much where we're heading, that's where like we're like it doesn't make sense. But when we start to lead with the soul, to lead with like this inner knowing that we can't explain, but we just know. We know that we know, and that's the end of it. And we follow that lead, that like kind of like a path that unfolds under her feet as we go in, if we have the trust and if we can get out of our head in our own way to just go.
Well, this is interesting that you say that because one of the questions that I often get asked then is like, okay, so if I'm willing to allow my soul to lead, like, how do I get my mind behind that? So, right there, when you said it's like, but how do I get my mind on board? And for me, it's like, I actually don't try to get my mind on board. It's like, what if my mind doesn't have to get it? What if it's like there are things that I don't see yet that I know will be revealed to me? So, like in this example, like if you would have tried to tell my mind at that point that that business was going to be complete, like I would have been like, makes zero sense. Like my mind could not have gotten behind that. And for me, like, and I think that was maybe one of the starting points for me, even of being like, my mind doesn't have to get it. Like, if I feel it in my being, if my soul gets it, if I'm in trust, if I'm willing to allow things to be revealed to me, my mind doesn't actually need to even come into the equation at all.
At all. It at all. And the the interesting thing is I have been connected to my body like for so long, but because there's this struggle behind, like between your mind and between like what your body is telling you, I had a hard time for like 2 years ago. Like I was going through this process, and I had a mentor back then, and I asked her like the question, like, what if I actually move to a place where there's nobody,
Where
how
there's
is this
what?
spot where
If
there's
you,
nobody there?
mm,
Like where I can't find, like, how is like, I know it doesn't make any sense for me to say this, but like this is the fear that I have. Like, what do I do? And at the end of our container, like I was, because she helped me on like the business side, like bringing my identity to the new business. But also she mentored me in like life stuff, because I felt very isolated and I was dealing with a lot of things around me. And I just needed somebody to support me, not in a therapeutic way, just like to have somebody like to hold me, because I had so much like that was going on. And at the end of that container, um, you know, I was like, okay, let's do more business like organization thing. And every single time we were going into that, my body was having such a huge reaction to like, it was like, no, you're not going to build a business that way. And I was like, yeah, but it doesn't make sense that I don't build a business the way that we build business. No, you're no, no. And I had like this huge, huge, huge reaction. I was like, okay, I'm just going to take a step out. I finished that container and I entered the coach program with Melanie. And when I entered the coach program with Melanie, one of the alpha team, probably like because they vet us, and they went and she saw that I had mountains in one of my pictures or whatever. And she said, Oh, one of the mentors that isn't that is co-leading with Melanie, Jaclyn, is also a mountain person. I think you're gonna click, and I was like, oh, okay, like cool. And
That's the first time you told me that. I've never heard that before. I love that.
and I was like, okay, like cool, like I'm all in. And my previous mentor, she was like, well, you don't need the coach program. I said, I don't know. Like, and I had this discussion with my husband as well. He's like, you're a great coach. Why do you want to go into the I said, I don't know. There's a poll. I need to listen. Like, I just need to listen. And I went into the coach program and it was, it was all fine. I was like expanding because I was doing like the one-on-ones, so it was nice to see like other types of like containers that we can create. But I was like, not sure, not sure, not sure. And for context, I live in the forest. Like we moved out in the country in the forest, in the Black Forest, and the vibe here is just amazing. But there's no like if I go outside like the house that we rent, there's no connection. So but there's such an energy here that is such in line with me, that is so like when it passes through me and when I coach through like that energy, it's just so powerful. And one day I was cooking in the kitchen because, like cooking is my meditation in action, basically. Like and I was listening to you. It was a live call with you. And you said something and I just stopped mid-cut and I started to cry my entire being, like cry, 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 cry. And I was like, she doesn't even know, but she has seen me so clearly. Who is this woman?
Wow.
Who is this woman?
Yeah. And I mean, this is interesting to hear you say that too, because I feel like when people are, in my mentorship spaces, like I really see people, like I really see people. But even before you exist like this for me, it's like I believe in people so much. I believe in people and their power. I believe in I mean, I mentor mostly with women. Like I believe in women who are here to do like really incredible things in the world. And one of my biggest things is this feeling like if women can really like get out of their head and into that state of like their own sacred wisdom and bringing that forth, that's where the magic lies for each of us. Like we have this potent medicine inside of us and we each do, and it's so unique. And a lot of women will get on calls with me, and sometimes it's in a group space, sometimes it's one-to-one, and it's like they'll unmute and they're like, and I can feel the tears coming. Like I can feel myself about to start crying. And I feel like this is in response to like it just feels like a full body surrender into like not in surrender to me, in surrender to their own truth. And I like hold that presence and that energy for people to truly drop in to their own truth. Like this is my biggest hope, desire, wish for every single person here, every person listening, is that you allow your truth to lead and know that your truth like is the truth. Your truth is the way. And as soon as we flip this, as soon as we look at something outside of ourselves and give it more power, we're shifting out of like our truth and alignment.
Absolutely. And
And it's like a
it's
it's this
yeah,
constant like come back to self, come back to self, come back to self.
that's what I've never experienced anything like this. Like we talk about like, emulating or calibrating but like when I felt that day and when I started to step into your spaces, whether it was your podcast, whether it was like the crew containers, the Voxer containers, it felt like I was seeing myself even clearer than I have ever seen myself before. And it was so overwhelming. It felt like I was entering in your space where there was no expectation. There was just pure me, or pure like the women that were in our spaces, so much that it was too much. It's like it's we're not used to this level of like spaciousness that is too much. And every single time I've been in your space or sending you messages, I had like I was either crying or I was either like I had to like pull myself back together because we're so used to not being all in our power, like all in this divine connection with the soul that we've been for so long.
1000%. And this for me is like, I coach and mentor with a lot of women who are entrepreneurs, who are leading a business. And I don't coach in business at all, I would say. Like there's no like strategy element for me because for me, it's like what you just said there. If you can lead in the fullness of who you are, if you can use your social media, your podcast to be the fullest expression of who you are, like that's where the magic lies. Like you are, I am, we are the creator. Like we create via like our own energy field, what we're willing to stand in conviction, what we're willing to bring forth from within us. And so this for me is always like for women, it's like bringing them back again, harnessing your personal power, finding that like God wisdom within you, using and activating your soul voice.
Activating your soul voice, your truth. You had a moment in your life where that was not the case. And I know that it's very close to your soul's purpose because you know the power of unlocking this. I remember in one of the containers that we were together, like you were referring to your blue nails as a reminder of, because the blue is the throat chakra.
Yeah.
And when I got into your space, that was completely the place in my body that was locked because because of all circumstances that happened, like I had completely mute myself. And even in places where had muted myself, I didn't speak the language, for example, like when I was doing it. So it was like just showing up for myself and speaking was like this big hurdle. But as we move through that, as we continue to show up, as we build our capacity, our bandwidth, as we build our trust within, then it becomes so like there's a speed that happens and it's like, okay, hold on a second, like there's doors that I didn't even know I had, and I started to like open all the doors and like not being afraid of like what was going to come up, and things that has happened like in the past year that I have never like even saw coming. And yet, like I was speaking to a friend the other day, and because I made some decisions going forward, and she looked at me and she was like, oh my God, it all makes sense. And I'm like, it all makes sense. But if we're not willing to step into that, we're missing so much.
And that's the thing. It's like, can I be willing for it to make sense down the road? Like, it doesn't need to make sense right now. And I'd love to touch on this like blue nail, activating your voice piece, not so much for the blue nail part, but I just really want to even share my journey with, activating my soul voice at this level to where, because people always ask me, like, have you always like had this knowing, this trust, standing in conviction, like your voice and the power? And gosh, no, like it's been such a journey for me. And the thing is that there was a long period of time where I didn't, I mean, there was a period of time where I very much knew that I was like, did not want to be heard in my truth, in my voice. It was like, I definitely like was dulling everything down. It was definitely like, okay, say what they want you to say it in this way so that they buy. Like there was very much like, there was, a point and a time where it was like who am I? Like my voice doesn't matter kind of a space. And then there was this period of time where I really felt like I felt I was activated in my voice, let's say. Like I felt like I was activated in my voice. And then I started to pick up on these like little hints of nope, like there's still like this filter here. And I literally started to, and I don't, when you talk about feeling things in your body, I'm not a person who feels a lot in my body. It's like not my mind, not my body. It's like I it just like is like soul knowing. And at this point, there was literally, and oh my gosh, it like just came back to remind me of this feeling right here. I know it'll move in a second. It was like felt like right here, like at the base of my throat, this golf ball. And it was like this. I was like, yeah, there is still this hold back. Even though I thought I wasn't holding back, there was this hold back. And I started painting my nails blue. And like for 2 years, I think like I only ever had blue nails. And it was this like reminder of like speaking my truth and activating this, my throat chakra. And as you can see here, I'm a hand talker. So it's like every time I would be like on a Zoom and I could see my blue nails, it's like pure expression, pure expression, pure expression. And then fascinating enough, last November, I was leading my in-person experience in Costa Rica, and the women that showed up, they're like, "Where's the blue nails? Like you just stopped with the blue nails." And I almost didn't even realize it. Like sometimes right now I'll go back to the blue nails because they're fun, but that's also was like I actually stopped needing the outside reminder like on my body to like speak my truth. But for a long time, it's like there was, there was things like acting as this reminder, like open your throat chakra, speak your truth, like be willing to be misunderstood, be willing for people to not get it, like just speak your truth. And now, you know, I would say really last fall as well. My dad died almost a year ago, and this like there was a massive shift in my own podcast, like all kind of last fall. There was another like depth of layer in this speaking from my soul, I would say. And so I wanted to share that because I think sometimes it's so easy to be like, well, can I just like flip the switch? Or is it like, am I doing something wrong here? And it was a journey, just like everything is. It was a journey for me to be able to like really trust even in my soul voice.
Yeah, because what we see is like the person that is in front of us that has made all this and that is moving with so much ease that it is like, okay, like, will I ever, move, not be like that, but like move with so much ease within my voice, within my power, within my truth. And I think it's interesting because, um, you know, there's so much of your work that is like letting go of what was, like cutting and letting go. And we can learn the lessons and we can but like letting go of whatever identity, really being in who we are right now. But there's almost this like I am becoming, I am becoming, I am becoming. It's like this ting tong, ting tong, ting tong. Like right this minute, if I'm actually like choosing something, or if I am being something, I can in the next second or the next minute choose something else that is more aligned with me. Because so often I think that people get caught up into decision making because everything is like life or death almost like situation, instead of just being like, okay, like I'll just take this decision, I'll see where that leads me, it gives me more feeling, information, or whatever you want to call it. And then you're like, oh, that feels good, I'm going to continue with that. Or not so sure, I'm going to either switch or course correct. And the more that we do that, the more that we're getting comfortable with the willingness to choose, because we know that it's not forever binding.
Yeah. And well, and this I think brings us back around to this circle energy around time and timing. And what I'm hearing you say there, like the way that I perceive this and experience it almost can feel contradictory. Like not what you're saying, like what I'm about to say can feel contradictory because it's like I just shared, it's like it's a journey and things happen in an instant. And so it's like, can I honor both? Can I allow it to be a journey and can I allow things to shift in an instant? Can I allow something new to open up in a moment? Because things happen moment by moment by moment. Like things happen in an instant. And this is why it's like that piece where it's like, can I be in that allowing? Can I allow things to be revealed to me? Can I celebrate where I'm at right now? Can I celebrate the journey of it? And this is why though it's like if I felt like things couldn't change in an instant, if I was like, oh, it takes time, it takes this, it's blah blah blah, well, then each decision I make wouldn't feel so powerful. But if I know like I can shift things and things can shift in an instant, it brings me again into that now frequency. Like now matters. Now is important. What I choose today, the belief codes I have today, the thoughts that I allow to live in my energy field matter. And when I say the thoughts that I allow to live here, we allow the stories to live. We allow ourselves to hold on to these untruths, these lies based on past experience, past moments, past memories. stories we've adopted from outside of ourselves, from other people. Like we choose whether that remains in our energy field or not. And this is why things can change in an instant, in a moment. And there's also the journey of it. There's this journey of that awareness of self too.
Absolutely. It's like a minimalist journey, but for the energy or the belief code or the behaviors or like everything that, and that you sift through and you're like, okay, is this, you're saying often like, is this serving me? No, out. Is this serving me? Yes, stay. It's kind of like this sifting through it. And it's not even like a mental journey. It's like this growth and expansion of your energy field and this pristine cultivation of what lives there. That's
Yes.
what I.
Yeah, exactly. And I think why I feel so like that this is so important. It's like, can I honor the journey? Can I honor the moment of now? Because it's so important that we don't make the moment of now, like where we're at right now, wrong.
Mm,
And when we
absolutely.
don't see things as a journey, it's like, well, I have this want to be there. Why am I not there yet? Or I have this want to move out of this fear. Why haven't I done it yet? Or I have this want to, align with this. And I hear this so often. It's like, okay, I've been doing all this work. And then, oh, that thought came in again. And I thought I had broke through that thought and it's there. So now did I just F everything up? And it's like, nope, like you're in that process of recoding. And there's going to be a moment where there's nothing left to recode from that experience because you have recoded, but right now you're in the process of the recoding of that belief code.
Absolutely. And it's like going from the human experience, rim like the human wants to, go back in the driver's seat, but you just say, no, I'm like, let the soul be in a driver's seat and like move forward. And this incredible like dance that we have instead of like, because when we get into like those human moments, if we start to like go into that road, then we're not even like letting that live in our energy field. We're bringing a whole bunch of stuff that don't need to be there instead of like going back into um yeah, no, this is going
Yeah.
back to where I lead. I love this, and I think that you know there's one part that is like our truth, and then there's the part where it's bringing it out to the world. And I think that after being conditioned for so long to be behaving in a certain way, that also is, it's challenging to the human to really bring forward the divine, really bring forward the truth and the power and like the voice that we have inside, because like we're afraid of like, well, what will people think? Would they get me? Would they not get me? And there's this absolutely like quote that you put on several months ago. I was like, Jack, you've nailed it. And it was following a conversation that you had with Neil Donald Walsh, and you posted on social media, your experience of me is none of my business.
Mm-hmm. So here's what I feel about truth and what you've just shared there is that like my truth is my truth and it also doesn't belong to me. So my truth and your truth, like your truth is your truth and it doesn't belong to you, which means our truth exists for us to share it. Our truth exists for us to put it out into the world. Our truth exists for us to be in the expression of who we are, to be an expression of our truth. And when we are willing and allow our truth to come forward, that's where, we really like connect soul to soul. That's where things grow and shift and expand and change when we're willing to be in such a depth of truth. When my truth meets your truth, when we meet in truth frequency. And when I say when my truth meets your truth, I don't mean in the sense like that my truth has to be your truth and your truth has to be my truth. Like multiple truths get to coexist. But my job is to like speak truth, and your job is to speak truth. And then we're operating in truth frequency, even if those truths are different. And so that's why your experience of me is actually none of my business, because your experience through me, I feel is meant to lead you back to your truth. And so I've had tons of times with my own mentors. I've had tons of times with clients. I've had a lot of my conversations with Neil Donald Walsh have literally started like, and I like love his work. Like there's a reason why I've chosen him to be my personal mentor right now. I've been reading and studying his books for 7 years. Do I take everything that he says as truth? No. Most of our conversations start, I'm like, well, I've heard you say this multiple times. I've read this in your book and I perceive this a bit different. And now we have this like full conversation, like literally had a conversation with him 2 weeks ago. And at the end, like I'm always like being like looking, at the end, it's like, okay, like we're wrapping up in the time and being respectful of his time. And I was like there, and he kind of was like not wanting the conversation to end. And then when I was like, okay, bye, he's like, that was just one of the coolest conversations ever. And it literally started in this like, I know that this is what you say, and I'm not so sure about this. And he didn't convince me. It was almost like through letting both of our truths to exist, what we actually uncovered is that at the core, the truth was the same or very similar, but we were perceiving through different lens and different experiences as well. And so, this has been, I would say, such a gift and like freedom for me and freedom of expression and who I lead and how I lead and how I use my social media is this like allowing multiple truths to coexist. And so I don't need you to get it. I don't need something from you. You don't need something from me. Again, it's this just pure frequency of freedom. Like I am so free to be me. I'm so free to express myself. And like I said, when you meet other people in that energy field, like this to me is where magic happens. I recently shared this on my social media too, in a bit of a different context. I have a client who I started working with through a mastermind that I run with Melanie. And so this woman did not choose to come into my offerings. Like she signed up to work with, and it was the first matrix I left. So it was before Melanie even had announced that I was coming in to co-lead with her. This woman had signed up. So it was not in her like, oh, I feel aligned with Jack, let me work with her. But she came in and she's hired me. We've worked in one-to-one capacities since then. And she doesn't believe in God. She does not like the word spiritual. She's like, I like literally have an aversion to the word spiritual. I call myself a spiritual mentor. I talk about God all the time. I talk about God in my conversations with her, and she hires me not because like there's still magic that we get to create together, even though we have different beliefs. And
Yeah,
so when I don't need to convince someone else of my beliefs or that I'm right, when I allow them to experience their own truth and I get to experience my own truth, like that to me is a very powerful place to be operating from.
absolutely.
She
Because
gets to
we're
be her, I get to be me.
exactly, I was going to say exactly that. We stay within our experience of thing, and then we can exchange on that and expand on that. And this is so foreign in what we've been experiencing in the society and in our lives, So when we get into that realm of conversation where it's like I don't need you to be anything else than what we're having right now as a conversation. See how our experience that we bring forward, our truth that we bring forward is is moving around that, then it's a gift. It's a gift because we all expand into more of what we are
Yeah.
collectively and individually. Like it's
Yeah. Yeah, this brought up like another moment and another memory. I'm a line six in my human design, so I'm a storyteller, and my clients are often like, yeah, through the story, the thing gets unlocked for me. And I'll just share this like little bit of story because it feels in such resonance right now with this conversation. A couple years ago, I had, made some decisions that felt like right for me, right for my family. And one of my friends was like, well, if you're on one of the topics that, the world tends to feel divided around. She's like, if you're so passionate about this, like, why aren't you like out there, like shouting this from the rooftops? Why don't you use your platform, your podcast? Why aren't you like going and being part of like this that other people are like doing? And I'm like, and I like sat with it and I was like, oh, like there was and even this conversation there's this like moment of like, well, because there's like that's what's right and true for me and my family in this moment, but I don't think that that's right and true for anyone else. Like, again, like what they choose right now is none of my business. Like their journey, their whatever's in service of their soul agenda, like I have no idea about. So I'm not going to go convince other people that I'm right and they're wrong. I'm staying in my lane of like, this is the wisdom coming through my soul. This is what I choose. This is right, it's right for me. And like you also have that same sense of freedom within you. Like you get to choose, but can we choose each of us from our own personal freedom, from our own personal power, and not shift outside of ourselves as we make decisions and like big decisions in our life?
Absolutely. And that's why I love like this shifts also like that's why like it shifts also the way that we do business. Like we the way that we decide in our lives, but the way that we do business is not like I am putting out offer to convince you of anything, you know, like in this like big masculine energy. It's like I am here in my energy and I am not convincing you of anything at all. Like this is who I am. If you feel the pull, if you feel the call to come into that energy and walk with me, then let's walk together.
And
And
I
what happens in those containers is so much more powerful because there's no pressure on anything. We're just two humans on this human journey, shoulder to shoulder, and we're just walking and we're exchanging and we're being ourselves.
And this is where I think that we have to stand in conviction of that knowing, like walking with me is powerful. Like walking with you is powerful. Like that sense that it's like, okay, like come, it can either be like, come take this walk with me, let's go for a stroll, or like in your power, like let's walk, let's move, let's do this. Like for me, I know that when women come into my world and into my mentorship, things are going to transform for them. And maybe not in the way that they think it is, because it might not necessarily be in this like outward results, thing. And of course, like there is, and sometimes like everyone's work is different here. But I know if you are meeting me in the frequency of truth, my power, your power, things are gonna transform. And so again, like my job is to like hold that space to be the full expression of who I am. And just this morning I received a Voxer message from a client who's just finishing up a mastermind space with me. And like this is like not an exaggeration. Like she said it multiple times in the message. She's like, you literally like saved my life. And she's like, and I know that feels big. And I know that if I said that, people wouldn't believe it. And she's been in a major life things happening. And I was like, no, I do believe that. Like I do know that because I hear within her a different knowing of self. So I didn't save her life because I'm the savior. I didn't come in and fix her. Through our conversations. Like she found herself, she found her voice, she found her truth. And by me being who I am and being willing to lead first in my truth, all I did was give her permission to do the same.
Absolutely. And this is where, you know, when you started all of this and you were saying like if I can help one woman, then it's worth it to show up. And you have like that what you just said, that could have been me. I know that I left you a Voxer message months ago where I was like, Jack, you just collapsed so much around like my timeline of getting where I was getting just by being who you are.
And I think that I want to really like highlight this for everyone because I don't want it to feel like I have this power and
No,
you don't or they don't. It's like every single person listening to this, like you've had a conversation with someone that's changed the trajectory of their life, whether they've told you so or not. You've posted something on social media one time that impacted someone in a way that you have no idea. And the thing is now I'm collecting evidence. Now I have people telling me, now I have people sharing with me. For years, I didn't know. I didn't know the impact I was having. I was, like I said, I was scared to use my voice before even the blue nail time. I would go live on something like this and I would be like, okay, I need to have notes. I need to have almost a script. Like I need to read. I need to say like the right thing and the perfect thing. And if I, that there was all this energy caught up because I didn't understand then that my truth just creates impact. And that's true for me, and it's true for you, and it's true for everyone listening. Like your truth creates impact and a ripple of impacts when you're willing to speak it.
It's the safest space, the safest place to be, the more secure space to be is there. And you say that so often, it's so true, because then it's just who we are, and it we don't have to figure out anything else than just being ourselves and move through that. And it's been such an interesting unfolding of on my end, but also like in every way. Like I can see you, like just you were saying, like in the fall a lot of things were happening. We could feel it, that a lot of things were happening. Like in the past year a lot of things has happened, like and all of that following like a moment in your life that actually changed, like it's shifted. Like I can feel that it shifted. Like it all shifts. Like I know that losing my mother set me on this path of personal development, growth, and evolution. But when we are already on the path, then our relationship with those changes as well, because we don't get caught up too much with the human. We actually we can see a bigger picture. And I know that sometimes like it feels so overwhelming, but it's such a beautiful journey at the same time, like
Yeah. Yeah. And I talked about this a lot on my own podcast. Actually, like after my dad died, the first few episodes, I really just shared from this like real place. Like, this is my experience with death. And I was very close with my dad. And it's like, this is what it feels like to navigate the human journey and the soul journey, and to be in such celebration of his life, and to also feel the sadness that he's not here, and to also like trust and feel and know, like, I feel his presence around me all of the time. Like, literally every conversation I have, it feels, and so it's been an interesting, journey and expressing myself through this experience. And also has felt like there's like no time to waste here. There's no time for me to lose. Like, there's no not just like speaking my truth, because like knowing that's what I'm here to do, knowing that's what we're all here to do. And this brings me back to what came through and what I felt when you were talking about safety. It's like, well, how can we ever possibly feel safe when we're not being who we fully are? Like, of course I'm not going to feel safe if I'm not being who I am, because I'm like, I can't even trust in myself. Then, of course, I'm not going to feel safe if I'm holding back in my truth. Of course, I'm not going to feel safe if I'm not willing to express myself, because I don't feel held by myself.
we don't have our back. Who's gonna have our back if we don't trust the universe has our back? Then
And I
so
think this is so important here though. Like, let's dive into this for 1 second. Like, trusting that the universe has my back, and trusting that God has my back. And people have asked me, they're like, how can you trust in that so deeply? And it's like, because I also trust and know I have my back. And so again, it's not this power outside of me, like, oh, the universe has my back, God has my back, because they exist out there and they're more powerful than I. It's like, well, of course, God's conspiring in my favor because I'm conspiring in my favor. Like, I decide, I choose where I invite God to play with me. It's like I set the stage, and it's like, this is where we're playing. Like, I invite this energy forth.
this is a whole other conversation. And it has been it's a whole conversation, our relationship with God, and like as opposed to what we have. And it's interesting, and I don't know if I want to open this door or not, but my experience of God has been such a different experience of what I have seen other people experience, that for the longest time, and because as well of my training in as a scientist and in biology, I have put it such like seventh basement of myself and my being. And there were so many things that didn't fit, like in the conversation, what people actually like think about God, or like their spiritual path and whatever, like, and it was such in contrast. And I wasn't understanding why people were, so I was hiding basically. I was hiding so much. And at some point last year, I was like, okay, like I'm just gonna pull that back in because I don't think that my experience with God is like other people's experience. And what if I bring my voice to the forefront and say what I need to say about around God and my experience and my experience with, you know, my mom's passing and my experience with my connection with the divine itself. What if I bring it forward? Surely I'm not the only one that feels alone, you know, or feels that whatever people are saying is not my truth, you know. And it's not because I need them to, like you were saying, I need them to know my truth, but like if there's somebody else that is activated by my truth, I need to show up and share it as a means of liberation and freedom and like leading with who I am, but also because the connection that we build on those grounds with that
Yeah.
exchange, those exchanges is so powerful. It's so
And I think
powerful.
right there, and I think right there, like as I know you said, we don't want to go a deep dive into this, but it's like just coming back, like that connection to self, that connection to the sacred within, that connection to the God within, the connection to the divine within, that connection to the spirit within, the universe within. It's like when we recognize it already, like it exists, all exists because you exist. It exists within. So we go within first. It's like within, then out. And I think this is flipped for a lot of people. Like they go outside to try to validate and then go in. And it's like, no, in, then out.
Then out. Jack, thank you so, so much for coming on the podcast, this new podcast. Thank you so
Oh,
much for being who you are. And you want to know something very interesting? I started to do that with the other podcast, but I had the Mary Magdalene Oracle, and before a podcast with somebody, I actually pulled a card, and I actually pulled the soul today.
mm,
And one of the things that it says is the soul is bounded, but the soul doesn't bind itself. It doesn't bind back. It doesn't, it's just, it just is, you know? So
I love that.
I think it's just so amazing, and you're amazing, and I love you, and thank you so much for everything.
So beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for this conversation. It was so incredible. And I'm so happy to be here. And I'm happy that it's on this new podcast as well. I cannot wait for the world to get to receive from you in this way.
Thank you.